Ivory Coast President Alassane Ouattara has formally submitted his application to run for a third term. That's despite more protests by opponents who say the constitution forbids him to contest the October elections. Ouattara is arguing that his first two mandates did not count under the new constitution, which was adopted in 2016. Over the weekend, several shops, a timber truck were torched during ethnic violence between Ouattara supporters and the opposition in the southern city of Divo. But tensions were running high in Ivory Coast even before his decision to run again. I'm now joined by a broadcaster at Channel Africa, Izak Khomo, to give us some analysis. Thanks so much indeed for joining us, and good to have you on the program again.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right, so I suppose Alassane Ouattara deciding to run again was always going to be met with some resistance from some quarters. Not a surprise, but just how dangerous can things get as a result of this decision?
Well, I think they're very dangerous because basically Ivory Coast is actually on the knife edge. They're just sort of emerging from a very terrible war. Or from a terrible war which actually saw a lot of death and also the impeachment or even the taking of President Gbagbo to the ICC. And the biggest thing that was in question was that there had to be some reconciliation between the different parties. But what is done now is just to open up the wound which was there, which is very dangerous.
So, you know, depending on which analysis you get and reports that you read, they talk about a fragile peace that's been established since the 2010 elections. Just how fragile are things? I mean, could we see an escalation to full-on civil war like we've seen in previous years?
Well, I don't know about the full-blown civil war, but basically it does not take a civil war to destabilize the country. Just a prolonged mass action could actually destabilize a country. That is possible. I mean, to say that given that what Ouattara was supposed to do was actually to have, as you can say, peace and reconciliation, but that reconciliation was not done. Yeah, in fact, one of the other contenders for the presidency said that Ivory Coast was able to build bridges. In other words, it's able to implement infrastructural program, but they've not been able to bring about peace amongst the people. Now, it's a very, very, very sort of sensitive issue. Not only that, Ouattara has actually made the situation worse by actually getting rid of any opposition, anybody who was there who could oppose him. I mean, I would start with one of his compatriots, Ndoro, who was a person who was instrumental in bringing him to power. But the agreement was that Ndoro, who was the Speaker of the House, that I think by now, 2020 was supposed to have been one of the contenders, the contender for the presidency. But last year, the man had actually to run away from Ivory Coast, where he was faced with embezzlement charge and has been tried in absentia, and I think he's been sentenced to something like 12 years. Yeah, so now you find that there's brought in division even within his own party. So the situation in Ivory Coast is very, very, very weak. The peace situation is very weak, and it's got to be very careful.
Now, all of this sort of kicked in when Prime Minister Amadou Coulibaly passed away, because he was the one picked to take over from Mr. Ouattara. Mr. Ouattara then goes on to say that the risk to our country will decline in many areas. All this leads me to reconsider my position. He's suggesting that only he can run Ivory Coast successfully.
Well, that's what it is. That's what all dictators say, that he's the only one who can actually run a country. And it's like Biya in Cameroon. He said he's the only one who's fit to run the country, and he's the only one who can understand the business of oil. But when you get to Amadou, foreign minister, the late Amadou Coulibaly, he was a foreign minister, and that was a very powerful position within the state or the government of Ivory Coast. In other countries, we say that the most important minister is the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Minister of Finance. From there, the Interior Minister, and then the Foreign Minister and Defense. But in Cote d'Ivoire, you find that the Foreign Minister is very important. This simply because the Foreign Minister and the President, they had to look after the interest of the big brother or the boss, that is France. So you find that Ouattara, Alassane Ouattara, was prepared to step down and let Amadou Coulibaly continue with the same format, with the same policies, which would place France in a very commanding situation. That's a thing that France will not allow to happen, or Ouattara will not allow to happen. Now, with the passing on of Foreign Minister Coulibaly, you find that there was nobody who could actually understand or who was privy to the whole setup of the relationship between Ivory Coast and France. And he, the only person who knew anything about that and who could look after those interests, it was himself. And I think that is the major reason which actually drove him to go back, to come and actually go for a third term.
So one of the challenges, of course, for President Ouattara is to keep his ruling coalition together. Just how strained have things become for this coalition?
Well, the coalition is actually fractured with the departure of Guam Soro. Now, Guam Soro is a Northerner. He's gone, and Ouattara basically he falls under the group of Northerners, although basically his ancestry is outside the Ivory Coast. But then you find that with his United Party, they had a gentleman by the name of Henry Konan BD, who actually who put him in power at the time when he was actually sort of contending for presidency with President Gbagbo. The agreement then was this, that Henry Konan BD, he was going to come with his constituency, which is a huge constituency in the cocoa growing area, much more to the south. Now, President Ouattara, he has actually defaulted on that agreement. So you find that BDA has moved out. And when he moves out with his regional constituency. So basically, his popularity is actually weighing down. But what Ouattara is actually banking on the issue that the Ivorians are not united. The opposition is not united. If the opposition could actually come together fielding one candidate, be it from the party of President Gbagbo or Henry Konan, BD, they'll be able to actually come and do something. But you find that the whole South is divided, and the North, basically, it is unified. So it's banking on the fact that he will pass through due to the divisions amongst the opposition politicians.
All right, and I suppose stuck in Belgium and without a passport, the chances of seeing Mr. Gbagbo return to fight his old foe, unlikely. But whenever we have these conversations about the continent and some of these countries, the long arm of France always seems to hover. And I wonder how involved or not involved is France in what might be on the horizon?
Of course, he's involved. I mean to say France is involved, sorry. France was involved in actually taking Gbagbo to the ICC. And when he got there, the ICC, they had a problem in actually sort of putting together the prosecution charges which could stick on Gbagbo. I think it took 2 pre-trial attempts to eventually, when the judges could say that, okay, now you've got a case, and then the case started. But when the case started, you find that all the prosecution witnesses, they faltered and they broke down under very, very severe cross-examination. They contradicted themselves. And some of them said openly that this is what they've been instructed to say. So you find that the case actually collapsed. to a point that Gbagbo did not even have, the case did not get to a second stage where Gbagbo had to defend himself. It was just at that first stage when the prosecution ended his case, when they said that Gbagbo's got no case to answer. And of course, the prosecution in Suda has appealed. But when they appealed, people said that in Suda there is a game being played that the Gbagbo case, the appeal will not be heard until after the elections in Côte d'Ivoire, which is the truth. But you find that France did not want Gbagbo there because Gbagbo wanted to change the whole relationship of the France-Afrique relationship between Côte d'Ivoire and Ivory Coast. Things like he was the first person to say that they wanted to get out of the CFA franc. They wanted to have their own bank. They wanted to give contracts to the Chinese, infrastructure contracts. Yeah, very big infrastructural contracts like building the bridge over, a third bridge over Abidjan. Now, and other things. Yeah, but so that was actually Gbagbo trying to get into the field, which was just the monopoly of France, and they removed him. But that's what people have got to see. But I think the Ivorians, they are aware of it.
All right.
And I think where they're going to now, it's really very dangerous.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there, but as always, your insights and analysis greatly appreciated. Thank you so much indeed, Izak Khomo.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.